She was hogtied, arrested, and held at a detention center while on her way to a doctor's appointment. In January, Minneapolis resident and U.S. citizen Aliya Rahman says she was heading to an appointment for her traumatic brain injury when she got stuck in what she thought was traffic. But it was actually an ICE enforcement operation. And in just moments, well, you can see right here, Rahman found herself being screamed at, dragged from her car, and then detained. Video actually capturing the horrific incident. You can hear her pleading for her life and telling the agents that she's disabled. Here's that moment that went viral. And as she's carried to the car, Rahman continues begging with the officers to let her go, trying to explain to them that she's also autistic. Now, fast forward to this week. Rahman went before top lawmakers at a congressional forum and recounted how she was taken to a federal detention center where she was held with no medical attention before blacking out on the floor and waking up in the hospital.
The last sounds I remember before I blacked out on the cell floor were my cellmate banging on the door, pleading for a medic, and a voice outside saying, "We don't want to step on ICE's toes." When I opened my eyes at Hennepin County's emergency room, I learned I was brought there to be treated for assault.
And here's the gut-wrenching kicker. After all that, Rahman was ultimately released without being charged with any crime. Now she's speaking out, not for pity, she says, but for change. Minneapolis resident Aliya Rahman joins me now for more. Aliya, let's start with the moment that you realized it was an ICE operation that you were in the middle of. What was going through your mind, and how did things escalate so quickly?
Yeah, thanks for having me. What was going through my mind at first was that I was trying to get to a doctor's appointment and not miss the 15-minute cutoff where you have to reschedule. But when I started to hear the horns and saw large vehicles with ICE agents coming out of them ahead, I realized what was happening. And I think at that point, I became concerned for whoever they might be taking, actually. But I ultimately had a place to go. So I was looking for a way out. Side streets were blocked when I first arrived. A couple cars back from the intersection, actually.
DHS actually said in a statement that you were an agitator and said you ignored multiple commands by an officer to move the vehicle away from the scene. Is that really what happened?
No. Bystander video from way back actually shows me saying, "I will," to an officer who asked me to move, who I wouldn't say they asked me to move, actually. They yelled into my window, "Move, I'll break your effing window." And I asked, "Where do you want me to move to?" And, the streets were blocked at that time. And in the video that folks see from the intersection, if you close your eyes and listen to that video, you hear lots of conflicting commands, right? So I absolutely complied with some of the officers, right? But when you're being told, "Get back, move forward," and someone's pulling on your door handle, which one of those things are you going to comply with, right? I complied with at least one.
We could hear in the video you repeatedly telling agents that you're autistic, that you're living with a traumatic brain injury. Did they acknowledge that they heard you in any way while arresting you? Did they treat you any differently?
Well, I know they heard me because the first time I said I'm disabled, I was still seated in my car, and I said it to the hands that were starting to pull me out after they'd smashed my window. And when I said I'm disabled, they said, "Too late." And the rest of the time I spent asking for accommodations, and then later I spent asking for medical care. And as we know, I didn't receive medical care until long after I was unconscious.
What concerns you the most about the way that you were treated, specifically as a disabled American?
Honestly, what concerns me the most is not me. What concerns me the most is the faces of the people I saw inside that detention center. And whatever it is that's causing us not to investigate these places immediately and bring ourselves past this chapter in American history where we don't have rules and accountability for how folks who say they're law enforcement can treat other human beings. It's a solvable problem. Black folks and Indigenous folks have dealt with this for 400 years, and we can all get past this. We really can.
Describe what you said. You said that you were appalled by what you saw in that detention center. Describe what you're talking about.
Absolutely. So when you first pulled into that place, I saw just lines of Black and brown people chained together, being marched out in the cold. I was right there with them once I was taken out of the vehicle, just silently hanging their heads, officers yelling. I saw people constantly laughing and taunting. They did it to me when I asked for my cane. They didn't give me a cane. They stood me up and started laughing and poking me and saying, walk, walk, you can do it, walk. The fact that I begged for medical care because I had shooting pain in my neck and head and wrists, and my vision had become blurry. And that started when I hit the ground outside the car. The fact that I had to ask for that for an hour, and then after I could no longer speak and then eventually became unconscious, my cellmate had to ask for that, banging on the door, and heard a response, well, we don't want to step on ICE's toes. That is completely unacceptable, and frankly, it doesn't even make their job easier. This is not okay. You see no blankets. You see just people pleading for basic human necessities. That should not exist. That's the kind of thing we tell other countries that they are in violation of human rights for doing.
Aliya, what kind of justice do you want to see, not just for yourself, but for your community?
Well, you know, I gave testimony at a joint hearing in DC on Capitol Hill on Tuesday, and something that really struck me is that you heard Representative Summer Lee, you heard Representative Ayanna Pressley, you heard Representative Latifah Simon say the answers to what needs to happen here. We have to prosecute everyone up and down the chain who is responsible for these atrocities. We have to immediately investigate these places, and we have to close anything that is violating human rights principles and not let those operators open another facility.
Aliya Rahman.
And we have to
Go ahead. Final thought.
My final thought is this. This is not new. I think what's happening with ICE has given people maybe new lenses if they needed it to see a very old problem, but we're here now. And we can become a country where we have standards and accountability for all law enforcement or people they say they are, and how they treat people as human beings, regardless of citizenship. That is what I want.
Aliya Rahman, you're a strong voice, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And we did reach out to the Department of Homeland Security for comment, but did not hear back. In a previous statement, DHS says ICE was executing an arrest warrant when one agitator, referring to Rahman, ignored multiple commands by an officer to move her vehicle away from the scene. She was arrested for obstruction. You heard Aliya Rahman tell you her side of the story.